me ask one more question, and this relates to NEPA. It's been mentioned a little bit, and some of you in your testimony here, but it seems that we've kind of moved away from a NEPA process that allows for this interaction between the permit applicants and the agencies to ask the questions, to provide some clarity, and to have that understanding. What it seems we've moved to now is more of an arm's length transaction where you can't have the, hey, we've got a question over here, well, let me help you clear that up over there. That adds to time delays. That adds to greater uncertainty. So we hear that that move or that direction to more of an arm's length transaction rather than the ability to work some of these things out as you're moving through the process. The other thing that I've heard, and Senator Duckworth mentioned a little bit in her question to you, Ms. Pruso, about the federal employees that you work with, those that are part of the agencies. One of the things that I hear is that you have a level of turnover within the agencies that if you are in a multi-year process, as Senator Risch has outlined, or as Mr. Russell has indicated that HECLA has gone through, where you have projects that are taking years and years and years, and you go back to the same agency, and now you have a different person, and basically you're retelling your story all over again. So the question, and I'll just throw it out there, I guess to you, Mr. Kaysen and Ms. Flieger, in terms of what you think we can do to get back to a more collaborative approach that can help answer some of the preliminary questions, and then to those on the applicant side, Ms. Pruso, Mr. Russell, how bad is the situation with staff turnover and what that then does to elongating this permit process? So let's start with you on what can we be doing to reinstitute this collaborative approach?
The long-term length of a lot of these projects do lend themselves to encounter staff turnover, that's for sure. One of the things that we're trying to do in Interior to combat that is we're going through a process right now of building a standardized NEPA compliance process and training so that all of our NEPA practitioners basically end up with the same grounding of what's required under NEPA and the CEQ rules, so that if you get a new face in the job, that at least they're operating from the same set of standards that we're trying to imply. One of the things that we've found so far in our NEPA streamlining process is that each of our agencies end up doing NEPA just a little bit different. And so we're trying to get past that and standardize it. A second thing that we're trying to do is really examine the CEQ rules and the NEPA process and make sure that we're cutting out of the process any of the things that are extraneous and not required by the statute or the regulations. So that should help as well. And then we're trying to build a broader cadre of NEPA specialists who, if we have a vacancy, we have somebody that's on the back bench that can come in and fill in on the project. It probably won't do a lot for the specifics of an individual project because each of those tend to be different, but it can help a lot if you insert a new person in that has the same background and training, that they can take over the project, learn the specifics about the project much more quickly, and create less confusion and disruption of the process.
Ms. Flieger, on the collaborative side, anything we can be doing more?
One thing I would say about the collaborative side, I've mentioned the coordinated project plans and how important they are. They require a plan, and again, this is at the start of a project and then with a quarterly update, a plan for public and tribal outreach. So that's built into the structure of FAST 41. To piggyback on what Jim was saying about Interior, our best practices report just released last week addresses the very issue you just described about staff turnover and the need for training. That's one of the best practices FAST 41 requires that we focus on, training and making sure that that project knowledge can move from one person to the next when there is turnover, because we understand how important that is, and as projects take time, we want to conserve and use the knowledge already built up.
How about from the applicant side? Ms. Prozio.
We absolutely experienced a high turnover rate in the federal employees we were working with. For example, during the 10 years our two projects have been moving forward, all of the BLM state directors in all 4 states, all of the district managers, all of the BLM project managers, and then many of the resource specialists have turned over at least once and sometimes more than once. And there's no doubt that that turnover led to a loss of momentum as new staff came in and tried to get up to speed on where the project was, what had been done, what needed to be done. And sometimes there was disagreement with what had been done. And this is where consistent policy and clear guidance would be very helpful, and as well as communication and coordination as these staff turnovers take place.
Very interesting.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, certainly the project manager is key. I've seen projects that have worked very, very well with good project managers that understand NEPA, understand what project management is, and drive the process. It has been a big issue for us at the Greens Creek situation. The Corps of Engineers went through 2 project managers, and nothing happened for a year. At Rock Creek, 11 months was lost when 1 biologist left the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Nothing happened. So those resources are very, very important. The role of the applicant is also very, very important. I believe NEPA still allows for applicants to prepare environmental assessments. And early in my career, applicants would prepare those. The agencies would review and approve them. We've moved away from that primarily because of fear of litigation. But that would be one way to get back to streamlining environmental assessments rather than EISs. Also at Greens Creek, we experienced because of this arm's length relationship that the Forest Service was developing independently alternatives to our proposal that were not technically or economically feasible. So a lot of time and energy was spent developing those alternatives, and when it finally came to preparing the final document, it was only then that they reached out to us and said, can you do this? And the answer was no, it's not technically or economically feasible. So getting the applicant more involved earlier in the process can address the points that you've raised on point, that you get a more streamlined and efficient process without reducing any rigor in the analysis. It's just much more efficient.
Mr. Turbin, do you want to add anything to this?
Sure. I think the sentiments I've heard on sort of both sides of the table are things that we've experienced at the Commission. We have relatively, in terms of project managers, low turnover. But that being said, you lose that key person, and it does have an impact for the project. That's why for the larger, more complicated projects, we'll have deputy project managers and others to try to ensure that institutional knowledge is there and that we don't have those sort of hiccups. I do think we've experienced much more turnover, or witnessed much more turnover in the other federal agencies, especially in the smaller regional offices, where it may be that the sole piece of institution, or the sole vessel of institutional knowledge, once they leave, that office is starting over from scratch, and that has been a problem we've seen over and over.
Yeah, that is a problem. We see it. Senator King.